While everyone in NYC is focused on the expiration of the rent regulation laws this week, there's another housing issue that's not getting nearly as much attention from lawmakers and regulators. Three-quarter homes are supposed to be an alternative to staying in a homeless shelter for the many men and women released from hospitals, prisons, mental facilities, and rehabilitation programs who have no other place to live.
But a recent New York Times expose about the illicit practices of one operator who runs many three-quarter homes right here in Brooklyn put a spotlight on the systematic exploitation of their residents and their deplorable living condition. It also revealed large gaps in our city, state, and federal regulations of taxpayer funds. Here to tell us about the problem and what's being done to fix them are two members of the Three-Quarter House Tenant Organizing Project. Amy Bloomsack is a community organizer. Welcome, Amy. Thank you very much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And Andrew Austin is a tenant leader. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
Andrew. Amy, let's start with you. I just learned about this problem in prepping for the show and reading the New York Times article. What can you tell people about what three-quarter housing is?
So a three-quarter house is usually a private home. It's often a 2 or 3 family home, looks like any other home. And what it is a three-quarter house operator will sort of hang out a shingle and give it a nice name like Path to Recovery, and then go recruit people from detoxes, from shelters, people coming out of incarceration, and pretend like they're offering a program, a licensed regulated program. And usually, basically, it's people living there are getting $215 a month, and they're in a vulnerable situation. They're sort of sold this description of the house, like it's going to provide them a bed, help finding permanent housing, help them sort of get back on their feet and get stable. And in reality, it's a very, very different experience. They are unlicensed and unregulated. And
what are some of the major problems consistently happening in these three-quarter homes?
Well, like Amy said, the three-quarter homes have given us the perception that we'll get permanent housing after a specific amount of time. And once you're inside of the three-quarter homes, no help is given at all on finding permanent housing. The only way that you can actually find that is to get out there on your own and do some footwork, so to speak, and trying to find different organizations that can provide that help for you.
Okay. Now, how many homes are we exactly talking about in the New York City area?
It's hard to say. There is no official list that exists anywhere, and part of the business model is that the houses sort of open and close very quickly. So, I think in the New York Times article it said one official estimated as many as 600, but it's
that was just in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, yes. So hundreds and hundreds of houses, and one of the other aspects of a three-quarter house is that they pack single adults into a room, so there can be as many as 4 to 8 men in one room, or women, single adults. So they're very crowded. So if you think about the number of houses that might be out there throughout the 5 boroughs, times that by 4 to 8 people per room, so we're talking about a lot of people affected by this issue.
And there's no easy answer, but why is nothing being done to regulate the three-quarter homes? I mean, what does the mayor have to say for this?
Well, the mayor did, after the article came out, he did announce that he was creating this emergency task force to sort of do enforcement and inspections of the houses. I think that is it's a good start, but I think what we need is long-term policy change to help create some other options of affordable housing for people to live in. One of our concerns at TOP, the Three-Quarter House Tenant Organizing Project, is that if the task force goes in and starts inspecting and finds conditions, the fear is always, will people then be made homeless if the houses are deemed too dangerous, or if there's sort of this reactionary, shut them all down type of thing. So TOP definitely is advocating for, these are houses that people need a roof over their heads, so we don't want to see people become homeless. We would like the city and the state to take some sort of long-term views at the problem and really work on creating alternatives.
I have to say, I was just really so surprised to learn how unregulated this entire sort of industry and, market is, considering that, these landlords, they receive, payments from the city, from the state, Medicaid, federal money. How is it that they're able to receive funds and there is no regulation?
Well, I mean, HRA will send a shelter allowance for people who are receiving public assistance. It's $215 a month. And so I think Andrew could probably speak to this better than I could, but you can go to HRA and ask them for a shelter allowance, and they'll send it to wherever you tell them the check should be sent. And you know, the other thing about three-quarter houses and the sort of exploitative model is that, you know, as a requirement for your bed, you're mandated to attend a specific outpatient treatment program, and there are illegal kickbacks happening between the house operators and these outpatient substance abuse programs. And so that's where sort of the federal Medicaid money is coming into play.
That was highlighted in the article. So can you tell us, you know, was it the experience like when you go into this sort of situation? Like, how systematic and revolving door is this policy?
Well, the whole three-quarter house thing is just as much a revolving door as prison, so to speak. Once you get into a three-quarter house, I myself, I was inside of a shelter before I was notified that three-quarter houses really existed. They referred me to Narco Freedom's three-quarter house, which is one of the organizations that has come up in the news as of late. And when I got there, they told me the regular rigmarole that, you know, they would help me with finding housing. If I needed medical care, psychiatric care, they would refer me to different places. When I got inside of three-quarter housing, the conditions inside of there were terrible. There are 4 of us inside of a room. I actually still stay inside a three-quarter home. There's 4 of us inside of a room. The room is about the size of the cell that I was in when I was incarcerated before, and there's only 2 people inside of a cell there. So, you know, look at the equation: 2 people in a cell in jail, and you got 4 people in the room on the street. There's a lot of fire dangers, a lot of fire hazards inside of these three-quarter houses because of the amount of clutter and things that people accumulate. These are these men and women's, all their property. These are their possessions, the only thing that they have. So they have everything with them inside of these rooms. The heating and the air conditioning systems are terrible. One that I'm in right now, they used to provide air conditioners for us in the summertime because it gets really hot. You have a lot of elderly people there. You have people with respiratory problems, people who are on medication for substance abuse, and the heat has a effect on these people. Being that this thing happened with the Medicaid fraud, the three-quarter homes lost a lot of income. So now all that they're practically getting is the $215 shelter allowance. They're not getting the money that they used to get from making us go to the drug programs. This monies were 3 times a week we went to the program. We were mandated to go 3 times a week. And every time that our name is put into the system, Medicaid has to pay for services. So this money was kicked back into the cycle, kicked back into the program so that they were getting more money instead of just the $215 for the rent.
I have to just interject one moment because I'm just a little confused, and the Times article just brought up so many different questions, and it is a confusing situation. So in my sort of layman's understanding, you know, these are not necessarily treatment centers, but, you know, halfway houses or homes where people are also receiving other services. Now, what happens if someone has a drug addiction and they clean up their act? What happens to their housing situation if they are no longer sort of an addict?
Right, I think that's a really good question because, you know, the way that these houses sell themselves is we're here to help you get stable and get back on your feet. But what tenants find often is that once they've finished, you know, the 6 or 9 months of Medicaid-funded treatment at their outpatient substance abuse program, then they are suddenly discharged, which is really just a made-up word. What they're really experiencing is an illegal eviction.
And they're also exploiting people on Social Security, right? I mean, that would lead to even more problems.
And disability.
Yeah, and disability. Andrew, and I want to ask you, am I right to think that your experience inside these three-quarter homes has led to your activism? Yes. Now, what steps are you taking with the activism? What do you hope to see improved, you know, right away?
Well, right away, the thing that I would like to see improve the most is the actual helping with housing. There's a lot of people inside these, it's estimated 1,200 people, I believe, inside the three-quarter house industry. The main focus of a lot of the guys and women who are in there is to find affordable housing. With the affordable housing thing that's going on now, with the lotteries for the affordable housing going on, and the deadline being reached for the what is it, the two
Rent regulations?
Yeah, the rent regulations. That makes it even harder for people in three-quarter housing. NYCHA, they don't allow people with criminal records to even visit their family inside of the housing authority. So if I have a criminal record and my mom or my relative lives inside NYCHA property, I can't even go visit them. So I know I can't get an apartment in there, and these are the only places that really I can afford. Even if I was on Social Security or disability, I would average $12,000 a year. For the rent regulations, you have to make at least $32,000 a year in order to qualify for an apartment, affordable housing. So I wouldn't even qualify. It would take three of me to qualify for affordable housing. So affordable housing is what we really need to get done in order for something to be done about the three-quarter housing, first of all, first and foremost.
Well, speaking of affordable housing and policy changes, we do have a quote from Scott Stringer. I think we can maybe put it up on the thing. He says, "This should never happen in a city that has the tools, inspections, databases of violations, etc., to determine whether landlords are upholding their end of the bargain when they accept tax dollars in exchange for providing shelter to needy families and individuals. Beyond that, there are existing regulations that are designed to hold some, but not all, agencies accountable by barring referrals to housing that has been deemed unsafe." And this was to the first deputy mayor. Can you speak to us about policy changes on the horizon and how the administration is sort of getting behind this problem?
Sure. I think what I believe the Comptroller Scott Stringer is referring to there is that the Department of Homeless Services adopted a regulation, briefly mentioned in the article as well, that prohibits unsafe referrals, sort of the worst, quote unquote, three-quarter houses. So, there is the potential to expand a regulatory system for referral making to other city agencies who are doing referring. So that's one possible policy solution. TOP is part of a coalition called the Three-Quarter House Reform Coalition that formed about a year ago. It's TOP, so tenants who are directly living the experience of being in a three-quarter house, as well as other concerned stakeholders like reentry organizations, legal services organizations, community-based groups. And the coalition has put together sort of a policy platform that we feel like could help chip away at the sort of context that has allowed three-quarter houses to flourish. So there are some things that we can do. Like, we believe strengthening the unlawful eviction law would really sort of help to, we hope, to stem the tide of the turnover that three-quarter houses are trying to do with tenants. Strengthening the unlawful eviction law would help prevent people from being thrown out on the street with no notice.
Can you expand on that law? What would that entail?
So right now, the unlawful eviction law says that if you have lived somewhere for over 30 days, the only person who can legally evict you from your housing is a housing court judge. But that's if you're a tenant. So I'm not a lawyer, just to preface this, but there are ways to strengthen the law by including other terminology that three-quarter house tenants are sometimes referred to by operators. Like, sometimes they're called licensees. And, really, we believe that the law should be focused on, if you've lived somewhere for over 30 days, you have the right to be in front of a housing court judge, and that's the only person who should decide whether you stay or go, regardless of what the three-quarter house operator is trying to call you. Licensee, tenant, shouldn't matter. Your rights under the law should be the same.
Now, tell us, before you leave, how people become involved with the activism surrounding this. If they haven't read the New York Times article, it's atrocious, the living situations. And I mean, this man, Yuri Bomblet, deserves a mention only because he should be prosecuted. I don't understand why he hasn't. I mean, he's headbutting tenants. It sounds like he's making them sleep on floors. Hopefully more attention is brought to the issue because of this New York Times article and because of segments like this. How do people become involved in your organizations and become involved in your activism?
I think they should feel free to reach out to myself, my co-organizer, Paulette Soltani. I work at Neighbors Together. That's where you can find me. You can find Paulette Soltani at MFY Legal Services, who has been doing work on this issue for many, many years. You can find the 3/4 House Tenant Organizing Project online. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. You can find us through either of the organizations I just named. We would love everyone to reach out to us, because the more people who get behind this important issue, we think the more likely we are to see some real change.
When you lose your house, your housing situation affects everything else around you. So just in closing, Austin, she gave us all the information for people to reach out, but what do you say to someone who may be in a 3/4 home now that is feeling somewhat despondent?
I would say just hold on. Things are getting better. Things are going to get better. We're fighting every day for the conditions to change. I'm not giving up fighting, because I myself am a tenant at a 3/4 house, and I need to help myself. So I fight for those who have the voice, but are somewhat scared to use it sometimes, because the housing managers, they threaten with eviction, they threaten with this and that, and it gives everyone a little fear in speaking out about it. But hold on, because times are changing and things are getting better.
All right.
Thank you for that bravery. Thank you for fighting. Thank you both for being here, too. Hope to have you back
Thanks for
again
having us.
sometime.